All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started in here in the interest of time. My name is Krista Hartsook. I am the Small Farms Program Manager at Iowa State Extension and Outreach. I am also the SARE Coordinator for the state of Iowa, and so this is the SARE Farmer Forum. Christy is going to talk to us, Christy Walker, about their companion planting of sunflowers that they utilized in a SARE Farmer Rancher grant. So I have a brief intro here. Christy Walker is the president of Walker Homestead Farm and Winery, an 85-acre working farmstead that produces a variety of foods, grapes, raises animals and honey, grows herbs and flowers using techniques that protect the environment and foster the development of healthy living. The farm grows produce for its kitchen from heirloom and heritage cultivars, selecting varieties to support a palette of flavors, colors, and textures, from which to build exceptional on-site field-to-fork experiences. The farm produced 2,000 gallons of wine this past harvest season. Christy serves as vice chair of the board of directors for the Iowa Wine Growers Association, serves on the Johnson County Food Policy Council, and teaches at the University of Iowa, the Department of Business Analytics. Please help me welcome Christy.
And actually, you guys are really lucky today. We're going to, all three of us who were involved in this study are going to present our experiences. So they're up here as well. And our whole topic, we see here the robin's nest and the grapevines, the nuts, what we use to take on the keeping our vines, our grapes free of this, our bird pressure. So our goal was to measure the effectiveness of companion planting sunflowers in a vineyard for both minimizing that damage of pest birds and also compare how labor intensive this option was. And our team, Joe Hannon, who's no longer with Iowa State, and I want myself, you've already been introduced, but Chris Larson, can you introduce yourself? And you got a microphone?
Yeah, I'm Chris Larson. I have Compass Hill Vineyard down by Winterset. We're about a little over 2 acres of vines down there. And
I'm John Barber. Can you all hear me good? Okay, I just want to make sure you get that good. I'm John Barber. I'm with the Ottawa Vineyards. This is a company that we started out when we first got into the wine business, and now we are the Cellar Winery. And we've been in since 2012. So glad to be a part of this study here.
So Joe helped us as we started out with the, we selected the Royal Hybrid sunflowers. It's high yielding, edible seeds, single stem, 7-foot flowers. You see the specifics here. We space 8 to 12 inches apart, rows 18 to 36. Bury them only 1.5 inches deep. And you don't do your first planting until after the soil reaches 50 degrees. And takes 100 to 110 days to seed, which is the important part of us using the sunflowers, not for the beautiful flowers, but for the seeds to attract the birds, as they're attracted to the protein, hopefully more than our grapes. And the planting plan that he provided with us was you would round up or herbicide 14 days prior to your first tillage until right after the soils are at that 50-degree mark. Our goal was that we would always have fruit for the birds as a detour from our grapes. And so planting them over 4 planting time periods every 2 weeks, May 1st through June 15th, would give us assurance that our goal that we would have a detractor from our grapes. We planted our farthest patch away first. Our goal also is a pretty backdrop for a vineyard. And so you always had pretty blooming sunflowers to look at. And then the other planting plan, after the sunflowers appear, we would do a post-emergent to kill off the grasses once the grass is 2 to 4 inches till. And you can see here the 3 acres of sunflowers we were goal for and how many seeds were needed, how many pounds of seeds. And John's going to go first with his experience.
Okay, I'll just show you the layout that we have here. We're kind of on a little peninsula. We got two major creeks that run through the property. And, from like the top of the bank down to the toe of the slope is probably 20, 30 feet. Jerry came out there and has harvested several times, and thank you for doing that. It's been a great experience. But if he went too far, there would be a long drop down to that creek with his machinery. Also, you can see all the timber and everything. And what runs around out there is deer and the antelope play. But we had our vineyard is about an acre and a half, acre and 3/4. And the sunflower patches are in yellow. Ones we did directly adjacent to our winery or our vineyard to the east. And on the north side, we have an equip, which is a pollinator habitat area, and we just kind of hug to the north of that with our other plot. We do have another pollinator habitat over in the south, just west of the actual winery. So that's that. Next, we got on good old Facebook Marketplace, hunted around out there and found two planters. One Chris owns, and the other one I got here. They're just a modified. Guy came in with a plasma torch and just cut up a big planter, and that's what we had. And he put all the attachments on. They seem to be pretty stout little machines. I have not had much experience with this seed farming annually. I've always dealt with a hay field or grapes, which are, every year they stay there for us, and we just kind of work underneath the canopy and so forth. So we got in there as we originally planned to do a burn down on the areas where we were going to plant the sunflowers. This soil, or this area, both of them have not been farmed for a long time, so it's a really heavy clay type soil, and the seed bank for weeds is pretty heavy in there. This is what I realized. When we, after we did the burn down, we waited a few weeks and wanted to go and till this thing up. We just got a Land Pride 6-foot rototiller and put it on the back of our Boomer 3045 tractor and started to go at it. But it had been really dry in that spring, really dry. And the tiller pretty much just bounced around on the ground and did not do a very good job of tearing up the soil. It got to be, maybe 1.5 inches of powder. That was all that was left when we did it. So we tried to plant it, but it just it wasn't really going to happen. We weren't getting any penetration whatsoever, and it was just dust on the ground. And the wind blew; it was just like a dust cloud. So all of a sudden, it rained, and we got a pretty good amount of moisture. We hired a guy to bring a big disc in there, and he tore it up. We harrowed it up as best we can because we didn't have we just rented the tiller. We didn't have one on site for us to use at our whim, and that was it. We prepared the seed bed, and time was running away. We talked about it earlier about doing successive plantings, and we ended up deciding that we need to get the stuff in the ground. We're going to plant it all at one shot because I wasn't really too concerned about, a constant bloom for the wedding backdrop or anything where we were. And we just wanted the seed heads to be matured, and we'll just do it all at once. So that's what we ended up doing next. So here's where the fiasco came for us, not being familiar with how these planters work. Maybe I didn't have it leveled out properly. Maybe I put them too deep, and I thought I was going less deep. Anyway, you can see on the outside rows, nothing came up. On one side of the planter, all the seed was going in the ground, but nothing materialized. Just the one side of the planter worked, and that was it. We're pretty discouraged about that. And then the weeds started coming up through the ground. I didn't pull out the old clethodim to control those grasses like I should have, but it didn't matter anyway because then the deer came, and they pretty much ate everything we had. There was just nothing left after in about 2 days worth of time. The other thing that was weird, and I know that there's turkey that are abundant around there, but I'd never had any in the vineyard. And this particular year we had probably 10 turkeys just hunting around there all the time. And I don't think it had anything to do with this planting, but they were definitely there. So, as you can see, this was the plot to the north. It was a much larger plot, and we did get sunflowers in there, and they matured, and they bent over, and they were producing seed. You can see they made these little bowls for the birds to come in there, and they were eating the seed. There's no question about it. But the weeds were overwhelming. And next time we do this, we're going to be in a whole different situation because we're moving our winery over to Snooze Hill, and the surrounding area is tilled ground. It's regular crop ground. So we won't have as big a seed bank, and the just conditions are going to be totally different than what we have now. But we did cut a bunch of flowers and take them down to farmers markets and sold them, and it was enjoyable. The next year, because of all that foxtail and grasses and stuff, we had to burn this thing off to kind of get it so we weren't otherwise we'd have to have some sort of a way to collect it all and put it in a pile somewhere. But we just burned off the field and started again. And in the following year, it was way better conditions as far as moisture was concerned. And we tilled up, it was just looked perfect. Then because of the deer taking over, we put up an electric fence around the plot, the smaller plot, to keep the deer out. But we had zero germination on both plots. We were just beat up pretty bad about this whole thing. We ended up putting nets on everything. We were originally going to net half of it, and then the other half go to see if there was any differences in the yield. And we didn't want to lose all that. So we netted everything. And harvest September 13, when Jerry came out there, we had a bumper crop. I mean, Jerry was like, "You're going to have a sale on Frontenac here because you got just a ton." We got like 16.23 pounds per plant. It was ginormous. So that was something, I mean, we had flowers on the north side, and we did net them, but we had a bumper crop the following year. It was considerably less, 10.38 pounds per acre, or per plant. So the things that we learned were in crop farming, whether it's corn, beans, sunflowers, you don't have big windows. You've got to get after it, and you can't delay at all. And weed control is pretty important as well. I mean, you can see what we had to deal with after the year. Those were like gangly little plants that actually made it through. And having some more equipment, some tillage equipment, whether it is I think the rototiller worked well, but I need to buy one for myself just to have on site and use it when I need it. And that would be helpful. And a nicer sprayer too. Mine's on the back of a Kubota. It's kind of like a cheesy thing somebody would use in their yard at home. I would like to have a better way to apply those herbicides. But when you're in a vineyard situation, you don't really need that kind of stuff, But there's more to it for the wineries to have these things, as Christy was saying, as a backdrop to the winery. We're agritourism, so anything we can get people out there to come to the winery and learn about what we do. Sunflowers are just another thing to add to the mix. And we're going to continue doing it. We're not going to let this beat us. Third time's a charm, right? That's what we're saying. There you go. Again, there's our harvest differences that we had. All of it was netted both times. A significant increase with the sunflowers that year. I don't know if that was just a fluke or what, but.
Go ahead.
No, grapes are a perfect plant, they say. The only one that I know of is St. Pepin needs to have something planted next to it. So there's no pollination issues with that at all. They just do it themselves. Any other questions for me? If not, I'm going to hand it over.
Did you look in to see if there's a Roundup Ready sunflowers?
Negative.
Joe did identify something that we could use once the grass got to 2 or 3 that didn't hurt the sunflowers. So we did have herbicide
Post.
that would have worked with sunflowers if used. Yeah.
Post or clethodim was
Post,
another
yeah.
one that we could use that was safe for the plants. So, on to Chris.
And we'll be coming back to John.
We'll keep circling back here. So, again, from my experience, so 2 years here, we've at Compass Hill, we've got 2 blocks. One's a little over an acre, one's just a little under an acre. Petite Pearl on the left here, and Frontenac Blanc on the right. And then our sunflower field was going to be located to the northwest. We put in approximately 3/4 of an acre of sunflowers to do this test. And then the highlighted in red is the rows roughly that we left unnetted or would leave unnetted to kind of test the difference here. Go ahead. Kind of a repeating story here. What we did learn out of this is that deer love sunflowers. We followed our plan, got everything planted or prepped, killed off the weeds and existing grasses, tilled, and we started our first planting around May 10th at Compass Hill. Got that in, 2 weeks later, planted, 2 weeks later, planted, 2 weeks later, planted. So everything was going great. I got behind on my weed control, so I could not get in with my tractor anymore to spray for weeds. So I went out one Sunday evening with my backpack sprayer on and walked up and down every single row of sunflowers for 3/4 of an acre and hand sprayed the grasses in between the rows. That was a Sunday night. Everything was great. Sunflowers were probably up to about my hip. And 2-3 days later, I went out and, Christy, you want to go to the next picture? The sunflowers looked like this. Not a single leaf on any plant. The deer came in 2 days and ate every single leaf, every single growing point, and we were done for the season. We did have a few. We had one. This was a text message that I sent Christy at the end of the season. 20,000 seeds planted, one made it. So we did, if you're trying to attract deer, this is a good way to do it. Now, moving forward, if you can keep the deer out, this was year 2 for us. So this is what our planting looked like the second year. We had a fantastic year for the sunflowers. We installed a cheap deer fence around the entire plot. We just did a simple 6-foot high fence, so 3 wires, 6 foot, 3 foot, and right at the bottom. And then we got some cheap plastic woven deer fencing that we bought from like Menards or somewhere. And then we could just clip that to the outside of the fence all the way around, and the middle wires provided some support. And that was all it took. It was just enough of a deterrent for the deer to keep them out of it. And you can obviously see that it went much better in the second year. Go ahead, Christy. Year 2 for us was a little bit different. The spring last year was really cold and wet. And just again, as other commitments and stuff happened, we weren't able to get out and get planted with the 4 plantings that we had wanted. And by the time we got to it, we got everything planted around June 4th in one shot. So we did everything at once, went through the whole process. I got everything sprayed for weeds. Everything grew well. The nice thing that we learned, again, I don't have experience being any row crop farming, anything like that. Vineyards is my background. So learning here, it was nice. I didn't have to do anything in the field after they were growing. So that was great. Let's see. We went through the season. Bloom happened around August 2nd. And But what we found was for us, it was too late. The seed stage that the sunflowers got into, it didn't happen early enough to really allow us to gauge whether or not the birds were going for the sunflower seeds versus the grapes. So we had in 2022, we had terrible raccoon problems that got into our Frontenac Blanc and actually decimated the entire crop. And so we didn't even pull a harvest off of our Frontenac Blanc last year. We managed to keep the raccoons out of the petite pearl, but again, so the unnetted vines for us in this experiment, you can see in the bottom there, unnetted vines only had 1.75 pounds per vine, whereas the netted vines was up at 10.58 pounds per vine. So in our situation, there was the sunflowers did not provide protection against for the birds, or an alternative crop for the birds. But we also point out that we were behind, and if I don't know that we gave it a full a good test or a good judgment onto whether or not that actually worked because of the timing on things here. Just general observations. Kind of echo what John said was we kind of went into this not having a lot of experience, so it was great to learn. We learned how to do this. We learned that it is critical when you're going to try to rely on something like sunflowers or something that is maybe not man-made. Timing is critical. You put yourself at risk if you're going to try something like this. You've got to make sure you get it in when it's supposed to be in. If you're late, it's just not going to work. Go ahead.
And then our experience. We have, you can see here the map, 20 rows of Verona, 20 rows of Petite Pearl right behind the winery, and our goal was to have that 0.4 acres of sunflowers adjacent to where the vines are. Here you can see in year one, after the first tilling, so you see alfalfa, the first of the 4 planned into cover crop, and then you can see the vineyard. And this is our year 1 plan. We did not do a burn down because we didn't feel that was necessary for our area where we were planting into. We did the 4 plantings 2 weeks following the post-emergent to help with the weed control. You can see our bloom dates there. This is a brand new vineyard, first time harvesting. We harvested everything on 9/5. This is second year. Last year, as previously said, it was just as bad in Iowa City as it was central Iowa. And we also prefer no-till, and so we tried it. It was not successful, the no-till for us. It might have been that there was no water for so long after the seeds were down, and then we went way hot. And so we had to redo that whole area, tilling it, planted, then just got 2 more plantings out there, 519, 615. Did the post-emergent. You see the 3 harvest dates that we did. And this is what the sunflowers look like the evening before the last harvest. And you can see the back rows where the heads are spent and providing good seed options for the birds. And we still have the front rows. Our goal is, if we're continuously planting it, we still have a really pretty backdrop for our guest. And these are our numbers. Young vines, remember, but the netted versus unnetted. The netted did a little bit better. And then in year 22, we didn't even get the nets out. And you can see how that they did. Again, these are very young vines, hopefully. So our thoughts, the sunflowers are a draw for our ag tourism, wedding backdrop, and that's our huge revenue stream. We do sales from U-Pick. We hand harvest last year a small portion of our seeds, and we use them for microgreens in the kitchen. People love them. We mix the seed with corn from our fields for the food for animals. And this year we saved enough, so we'll be using them for replanting next year. We haven't bought nets, and for us, not interested in the labor or the look of it. We're the permaculture of our farm, the birds being attracted to the seeds, we think are great. We visually can see that they're not that we're not getting a lot of pressure on our grapes. And we have attracted hawks, which are a natural predator for the birds. And we do have a cat, this is Frodo, who likes to hang on top of, moves around in the vineyard, which is also a great deterrent for it. So, and also this is what, in January, what the field looked like, that it's, in doing these studies, we recognize that we feel it would benefit from a little bit more science and a little more rigor on it. It's hard to be capturing data, managing the volunteers, and we recognize we have a really small sample size, and we have a lot of variation to the grapes, the age, the soil. So we'd benefit from a bigger sampling over a lighter range. Profitability comparisons. These are the cost, not including the planting equipment, which is huge. But seeds for 1 year, you've got your herbicide or your labor tilling, your initial equipment planning, revenue, the savings of labor, nets on and off, savings, the cost of nets, gain protein, feed the animals if you have animals as part of your farm, microgreens for food, the tourism draw, you pick flowers, soil health, supports regenerative farming, which is important to us. Here are the cost of seeds for the three of us. So it's relative to how big your bed's going to be. Weed control. This is what we purchased worked for us for over 2 seasons for all of us. So about $300 a growing season for weed control. Our overall lessons learned. So if issues with deer in your vineyard, you're going to have issues with the sunflowers and you need to protect it. That you need the right tools to manage the multiple planting. Here Joe is doing some training on how to use the planters at Chris's plot. And weed control is critical, that you need to start with a clean field. You have to maintain your weeds during to get productive crops, either chemically tilling or mowing the rows, which I've done before. John.
Just getting down in there and breaking up the soil and allowing more organic matter in there, and just kind of, that's what I've learned from it, is it does loosen up the soil.
Right. The whole cycle of keeping the balance of the animals, the vegetables, the soil health, feeding one another. So
It's like the big circle of life, you know, that all kind of works together in there.
Yeah.
And I think the equipment is the big thing for us, and just having the tools you need when you need it. That was something that I couldn't find a guy to come till up our little plot, because they were in the field doing all their work, and just wasn't able to pull that off. The timing is of the essence. When, like Chris said, row crop farming is a lot different than vineyard farming. Not that it's a bad thing. I'd like to learn how to do this a little better, and I would like to do it again. I think that, like humans are creatures of habits, I think birds have the same flight patterns and habits as well. And when you go to Michigan down around Paw Paw and stuff like that, they don't even net anything because they just don't have the migratory patterns there. We, unfortunately, have that problem. And I think if you continually planted these, that the birds would finally realize that, hey, I mean, I watch in my backyard. If I don't fill those planters, they go away. Or the cedars, for the birds. So they get used to where things are, and I think that would be helpful. And you would probably start to see trends over a longer period of time. We just, 2 years in 3 vineyards, just, and like she says, different ages of vines, different locations, different weather patterns. It would take a little bit more time to see if it would pay off. Protecting the grapes, I think it's an all-in-one thing. You do it all. If you really want to do it, is you put your nets on, you put your cannons out, you put your bird calls out, you have hawks, you have dogs, whatever it is, to keep those pesky raccoons and everything else out of your vineyards. And the turkeys, they'll do some damage to your vines too, or take your crop away from you. But the agritourism part, I think is the biggest thing for us, is that is a big draw. The people that come to get married, they're either in the sunflowers, which we haven't had the greatest experience with yet, but we also have pollinator habitat. And when we first started it, the wedding coordinator was like, oh, there's nobody going to want to come out here and look at this. It looks like crap, It's like, why do you want to do this? Where do all the people go and take pictures? Right in those crappy fields. It's just natural. It looks great. So there you go. Oh, that was our crop from last year, period. It really looked nice in the backdrop of the winery. What was that?
Royal hybrid. They do. They do. They look that nice. They look great. They high, and they're high rate for the microgreens too. They're the easiest microgreens for us to do. We were going to bring some microgreens today. We're really bummed that we forgot to do it. They're really nutty and big leaves. If you go to our social media, you'll see a bunch of pictures on it. Walker Homestead. Walker Homestead. I have the URL here in a second.
Yeah, and I think my final conclusions kind of mimic John and Christy. I came into this not without experience in growing anything like this, so I learned a lot over that first year, improved the second year. We'll give her another try in the third year here, and hopefully we've worked out the kinks on the timing side of things, and we'll see if we can't get any better data here moving forward, and actually test this out.
So all three of us plan to continue companion plant sunflowers in our vineyards. We discussed that may not be necessary if you're only using it for attracting the birds, that you just have to plant once early. And so you've got the seed heads pulling before the grapes get ripe. And so they're preferring that protein over the fruits of the grapes, and they'll stick with that. I have people specifically ask about when the sunflowers are going to be there for when they're booking their weddings. And I always tell them, I can't promise you we have sunflowers. We might have a hurricane. We might have, but I tell them our plans for when we're going to. And if we're lucky, they'll be there from middle of July through first frost. There's a ton of interest in that. People come out and just want to sit and have a glass of wine and look at them, even if they're not walking. So there's something magical about sunflowers. So, and
they were the same.
We
Royal
all
Hybrid.
here.
Yeah, we all did the same variety of cultivar of.
we did all of them the same.
I have not. I'm not into it as much as Christy was, but we would just. The seed was so cheap for us that it wasn't a big deal. We'd just repurchase again.
Get out and dig for them, see how deep they're planted. It's hard to do that. Yeah, they're hard to find. Digging around, trying to find these seeds. And I think our
So behind our house, we've had sunflowers every year, and that was the idea, that I could see that they were attracted to the sunflowers and not my grapes. And so that's when I put in for the grant. I've done, and before I did a whole bunch of different variations. This is a really solid producer, strong stem, holds up to wind really nicely, long-lasting bloom, which is good for the egg. And then the seeds, we only had to bother, you don't have to collect very many heads to get a huge amount of seeds. So we just do enough to mix for chicken feeds. We do our corn and the sunflower seeds together, which they love. And then for the microgreens. And like I said, we're going to I would love to find a way to get the equipment to do 22 acres of sunflowers. The problem is finding a buyer for sunflower seeds that makes it profitable enough to do it on that scale. So right now we're going to stick with, I think we're going to do 4 acres this year. The flower is...
So I'm noticing that not on the petals are perfect, but on the leaves, there's buckles. Did you guys have to deal with any? They didn't affect that.
Yeah. I didn't have to worry about spraying anything for the Japanese beetles stayed out of the sunflowers. So they're apparently just like the grapes.
Birds. So my chickens like Japanese beetles, like the permaculture you were asking about it, the attracting the bird. I don't know it'd be interesting, what kind of, are birds interested in Japanese beetles at all? I know that they like sunflower seeds and they like grapes, but I did not see a little bit benefit from the netting of it. I think that, one of our thoughts was, did the great year that John had, the best ever, he did have sunflowers and he netted. And is that two paired together help for a more productive crop, that they're after the proteins in the sunflowers? And so even though you net, you're still going to have bird pressure at the top through the nets at the grapes. And did that help that they had something easier to go after instead of grapes under a net?
What, roughly how much of an acre of sunflowers do you need per acre of grapes? Portion? Yeah.
So what we did, that's where SARE should fund another study to see what's the most effective. But we, each of us did what was convenient. And so it would be good to know is there a distance that makes a difference, and is how much? I think as long as there's food there for them that's convenient and easy, they'll stick there. I mean, just like for our animals, the best fence is a healthy pasture. They're not going to attempt the fence if there's good pasture, and as long as they have something great they like to eat, they're not going to go looking for more. And so, and those heads provide a lot of food. The nice thing about the security of having multiple plantings is if you have multiple dates for when your grapes are going to be, you're more assured that you're going to have food for them. Also, I can't overemphasize how attractive the drinkers are to sunflowers. And having a longer season of sunflowers in bloom, you're going to be attracting more people to your vineyard, your winery, to enjoy that part of it.
The bad thing, if you ran out of sunflower seeds, then you have all the birds.
Yeah.
So is that why it wouldn't be wise to say, put plant a sunflower between the vines? I mean, you wouldn't want to do that because you don't want it all
I think that just would be hard for maintenance of your, of spraying and, yeah. I was thinking,
I think it may be better to have that a little further away from the vineyard. Like our plot on the side of the creek, that was the best results that we had. I don't know why I got 16 pounds for buying off those things. It was crazy.
yeah. All good questions. It's also a really lovely backdrop when you're tired from the day of harvest that you can sit down with all purple and look at some beautiful sunflowers and have a drink at sunset. So,
I'm a big proponent of SARE Farmer Rancher Grant. I'm wondering if you can tell them a little bit about your experience in applying for the grant, how easy it is.
it's so easy to apply for these grants. It's so, lots of good support from them. It, as we, they're good to answer any questions. Iowa State Extension Office is great to provide expertise. I think I love the collaboration that we pulled together to share with each other our experiences and our woes and problem solve. And, we're all lifelong learners. So if you have an idea on how to help with the health of your soil or the productivity of your fields, talking to them, and they can help you with the Iowa State Extension Office with some ideas and help put together a plan to measure it. And other people, we did a podcast last year on this, and I had tons of calls from, can't tell about the interest of the room here, but I had tons of calls following it about people having an interest. And so from this, I think we're going to reach out with to see if we can find someone, a PhD interested in research or PhD candidate in sustainability. And I have names of people who are interested in this from that podcast. And so I could help with recruitment of vineyards across the state and make for a bigger study. I think there's a lot of benefits to getting all these varied roots in the ground for keeping water runoffs clean, for the health of the soil, another food source, the balance of what gets attracted to your farm. So would love to see more science thrown at this. And so what I was going to suggest to maybe a PhD candidate thing that they could apply for, they also have where they pair up a university person with the farmers to help provide that research. Yes, we're very appreciative for the funding of the study because it's a risk and it's your time, and to compensate you for taking on that risk is important. But that's how we learn.
I think if you had Dr. Christian at this, we would take probably 10 or 15 customers by one and compensate you for doing this work. That's really a draw that economic was.
Sunflowers have gotten to the rest, what you're saying.
You were asking me how much we did. Here's the table. So fast, like Japanese beetles, right? We have no trouble with deer, and we had no pressure on our grapevines.
You were very showing us.
It's funny. I had just finished spraying, and then it was a beautiful night, and I made a video, like just kind of interviewing myself, walking around the field. I was going to send it to Christy for this project to have, and then literally 3 days later, I went out and they were just gone.
Can we go back to that picture just one more time because I got that on my phone, and you know what I mean? Because he had sent me the photos of how beautiful it was, how great it was going, and
And none of them have the wherewithal to come back, except maybe that one.
Just the one, yeah. We had our last planting that year. It had been really dry, and so it was really slow to get going. And so I threw up a little bit of a temporary fence around what I could, but it was too late, and so we just got the one, and he was only about that tall.
One thing I know about sunflowers is that they're so resilient. We have trouble, I have a little sunflower patch, and squirrels are the worst, because they're right along the fence, and the squirrels will, do a little turkey zack on the fence and then jump on the sunflowers. And this one sunflower completely bent over, and I was like, I'm so sad. And then it just started growing.
follows the suns. They really do. Yeah.
They're a neat plant. Yeah, they're really interesting to watch and see how they move throughout the day and
Farmers curious as to what we're doing, because they don't want to have sunflowers. Usually they're weed. For the most part, they were weed, yeah, here's milk for all of us. But I haven't seen any, like, volunteer.
Nope, we don't get any. We purposely threw seeds down. We have a 4-acre filter strip, prairie flower filter strip, and we threw some sunflowers in there. And they just, they have to compete with the other prairie grasses that are already there. So some come up, and I figure it comes up in the areas that were maybe more bald. So that's all helpful.
Can you see that picture again? If whoever had the book, can you have their video? That was so very, yeah, the way.
It was, I mean, it's my most enjoyment.
Isn't that great?
It is. It's fun to have fresh sunflowers in your winery from middle of July till middle of October.
And sunflowers just
They do. They do. So I encourage all of you to plant.
You guys are using sunflower bigger seeds, right? So the birds have to crack and shell it and eat it inside.
All of them, yeah. They do a good job. You'll see.
Out of the sunflower seed, you eat it, when it passes through the bird, it can grow. Or you get the little thistle seeds and stuff the birds eat, that passes through the birds, and that's when you get your meat from. All berries.
Yeah, but we don't. So you're saying because they eat the seed part, the protein part of the seed, it doesn't have the spray of sunflowers around to other fields? Is that what you're saying? It won't, yeah. Unlike a raspberry or, yeah. Mulberries. Yeah. To other farms. It's not as, yeah, I don't see it we have 22 acres of row crop, and we've never had any sunflowers. The only sunflowers I get are the ones that I'm pushing out. So you guys gonna try sunflowers this year? Maybe? Highly recommended. Come again?
I would think with the bigger patch of sunflower you got, to draw the birds toward it, you would have more results beneficial, keep away from the trees, and get the sunflower seed away from the trees.
Yeah, my husband is like, every time I'm planting sunflowers next to a great, he says, you're just attracting birds. It's just, but and that's we haven't had that, felt that, seen that pressure in the vines, but it would be interesting how far. We had a strip that we put just next to the pastures, thinking that the heads would fall over to where the chickens are going, and tons of birds over there. So, which isn't that far away from the vines. So yeah, maybe making it a little bit further. Though those brides like to get into the sunflowers, so.
Yeah, and
Did the chickens get some sunflower seeds?
Yeah, our chickens free range as well. And our turkeys and chickens are in the sunflower patches as well. But yes. Yep.
And that's like, we're talking about this from a wedding venue standpoint, or agritourism, trying to draw customers and sell wine, versus Chris's situation, where he just, commercial vineyards, where there is.
Do you have a location do you have a buyer someplace that you could take your sunflower heads to sell? Yeah. Yeah. It is, row cropping is a new science when as John said, when we take care of our vines, we have a little bit of a play when we go out and prune or when we go out and, but row cropping is so sensitive to the weather, the temperature of the soil.
I would think that there's got to be more than one maturity. We should look into, like you were planting late and they didn't get mature. It should really be more than one maturity.
There are, and they're at different heights. It's just that we had bought all the seeds at the beginning of the season. With the supply chain also, you run into challenges sometimes in getting the seeds that you're after if you don't buy them early in the season. So you need both kinds of sunflowers on hand, right? The fast maturing, and the seeds will stay long. So if you don't use them that year, they'll stay for another year. Yep. There you go. Do the short ones in front, the long ones in back. I don't know. Just one time out there, the efficiency. Which is important if you're borrowing the equipment or you're contracting out the planning, that you could get it all in one day versus every 2 weeks having it back. So. Yep. Any other questions? Thank you guys so much for hearing us out.